I'm James Worthy, and thank you for joining me on the Not So Business as Usual podcast. Just to give you some additional background, right? I currently work in telecom today. I work in product development, but I have been in customer experience in telecom for, I want to say, about 10 years now. And I am I don't like using the word obsessed. I think that's like a buzzword that's being thrown around right now in customer experience. Like you have to be obsessed with. I feel like that's a little creepy. I'm very passionate about what I do. So I just say that. Earlier this year, it was really kind of put in my heart to start a podcast like this because I feel like there's a lot of podcasts out there talking about a lot of different things that aren't significantly relevant to me. And I felt like having a podcast like this would actually bring value because no matter the industry that you're in, everybody's trying to some way, shape, or form resolve the same issues for customers. So I felt like this was a good way to talk to people on the professional side, but also on the folks who own small businesses or the folks who are on the front lines to kind of get a really good perspective of like what are the real customer experience issues and then how do we come up with something that's also scalable and to have conversations about it. I've been doing this podcasting for a couple of weeks now, and some of the things that I'm narrowing down on is, I know that AI is maturing. I know that there's all this technology, and we'll get into that, right? But the one thing that I'm really getting a lot of feedback on is everybody wants something humanized. Nobody wants to feel like they're dealing with a robot. Nobody wants to feel like this is not a humanized experience, and everybody wants that human connection. And when I even talk to people who own businesses or who have different types of professionals where maybe there may involve something with a client. So for an example, last week I had an attorney on the show, right? And I really did a big back and forth with him on like, hey, like, how can I, if you could tell me a problem statement, if you could tell me something I can resolve for you to make your day easier, what would that be? And really from an AI perspective, it was like, dude, like, I don't need technology to interfere with my process. The reason why I don't need a technology to interfere is because I have a very human approach to how I do things. I
Mhm.
like to be in the weeds. I need to know. And if AI does a little too much circumventing for me, well, it actually, what it does is it kills my skills a little bit because I'm not using my skills every day. I'm relying on technology. But furthermore, too much technology actually gets me away from the human, right? If I have technology doing all these things for me, then I lose that personal touch with my client. So after doing a good back and forth with him, I whittled it down to what you need is not something to help your day be more productive, but what you need is something that's actually going to pull you closer to your client. And the solution I came up with, I'm not sure if you've ever been involved in a lawsuit or you've had to do anything with litigation, but one of the things that's really, really key there is the ability to collect information and doing it efficiently and doing it easily. So what I learned in that conversation is if we were to ever do something, or if anybody's ever thinking about attorneys and how to make their life easier, you do that by making their client's life easier. You don't need to make and you do that by coming up with solutions that help them collect information easier, right? It's so important to get information as soon as possible and for it to be accurate. So I said, hey, it sounds like what we could potentially need for an attorney to help your customers experience is giving them some sort of open-ended portal where they can just do like a brain dump. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be in any type of order. Just give the details that you can recall. And
Mhm.
then here's where technology can be a friend. Technology can then sort all that information out, organize it, and then present it to the attorney. So let's say, for example, I was, God forbid, but if I was in a car accident yesterday, I could easily go into this portal. Here are some pictures from this date and this time. Here is what hurts. And then that's it. It's very basic. And the cool thing is you just made your client's life easier because I don't have to fill out, if you've ever had to do this with an attorney, there's like a huge questionnaire you got to fill out. And it's just like, I'm already going through something. And then to have to kind of continue to go through a long thing of questionnaires, it's really kind of daunting. And it's actually kind of discouraging to some people. But that's a problem that maybe attorneys wouldn't have been able to pull out. But during that dialogue, I realized the attorney himself doesn't need the help. It's really about the client and how to humanize that relationship for him. If he has to continuously be behind emails and doing all this stuff, it dilutes that relationship. So, and the same thing happened with a personal trainer who owns a functional fitness gym who I met with, it's like, "Hey, I don't need you to change my day. What I do need you to do is help make things easier for my client." So that is where a lot of these conversations are kind of leading me, and I'm having kind of like this aha moment, whereas how do we make it easier for the customer? How do we reduce friction between the person and the customer? So I just wanted to give you that bit of background before we dive into everything. And then I would like to invite you to also kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are today, and then we can go on to the next couple of discussion points.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate. It's a great opportunity at any time to chat about customers and customer experience. My background is I have spent a very long time in hospitality and in customer experience. And so I worked in a lodging organization for many years and was the chief operating officer for two different lodging companies actually. Went into the consulting business where we focused on operational excellence as well as customer experience. Neither were really called that back in that day. They were called something differently. From my experience with clients, I was asked to join an organization called Delaware North, which is a global hospitality firm that deals in all kinds of hospitality businesses, lodging, gaming, food service, primarily in large public venues. And then was asked to join what at the time was Lend-Lease, which was a global real estate organization, to really develop their customer strategy and their customer experience. They had thought about themselves as a B2B business, not recognizing that they were also a B2C business, that
Mm,
what they produced from a real estate perspective had consumers who utilized it every day. And if those consumers weren't happy with the mall, the office building, the homes that were built, the retirement communities, the military housing, then ultimately neither was the client they were building it for. So helping them recognize what a strategy would be to deal differently with the customer, quote unquote, or end user, as opposed to the client who might hire you to do something but isn't the ultimate user. And so that's kind of been my background that brought me into customer experience work quite a few years ago. And it's a fascinating evolution over time. And it's also been a fascinating opportunity to work in so many different industries.
that's awesome. And when you say you worked in lodging and hospitality, one more thing about me, I actually started a business in tourism back
Mhm.
in 15. There's an island in the Caribbean called Martinique, and it is a have you been there? Have you heard of it before? Okay. Okay. So it's a beautiful island, well developed, but it's a department of France, which is basically meaning like it's the equivalent of what Hawaii is to the US. It's not on mainland, but it is still very much still part of France, part of the EU, etc. So they had a pretty well developed economy, and they were starting to get into the tourism sector. And then this contract came up with Norwegian Airlines for Norwegian to do direct flights to Martinique from the US. And at the time, nobody was really doing direct flights except for American, and it was out of Miami Airport only. So you had to have a connecting flight. And Norwegian was doing this initiative where they were going to do direct flights from Baltimore, New York, and I believe Fort Lauderdale to Martinique at a very and Norwegian Airlines is a low budget airline. So it's not only is it you're getting a direct flight, but it's also very low budget. The problem there, or the opportunity, and this is where I kind of really started to get into customer experience, was nobody really considered what the experience would be like having Americans come to an island where the primary language is French, the primary currency is the euro, and tourism from the American market is it really it was a very small piece of the pie. Most of your tourists are probably coming in from Europe or mainland France.
Yeah,
So
most Americans have never left the state they were born in.
I'm sorry.
You're correct because most Americans have never left the state that they were born in.
Oh my gosh. That's music to my ears, man. Like it's I on a side note, I know in high school we have to take civics in order to graduate. I feel like it should be a requirement for you to travel abroad in order to graduate high school, or at least travel abroad once before you graduate college, because when you travel abroad and you see different people and you see different cultures, number one, it gives you a deeper appreciation for where you come from. So when
For
people
sure.
are like, "Oh, I don't like this and I don't like this," well, okay, fair. Go see other places and come back and see if your perspective has changed, number one. But number two, it changes how you think too when you've traveled abroad. It changes the things that you take for granted. It changes the things that you find are important. And it also gives you the ability to see how other cultures live and how they move and have an appreciation for that as well. So I would love for someone to make a law where it's like, I guess financially feasible is not right for everyone to travel abroad, but you should definitely, if you can, travel abroad before graduating. But in Martinique, there was a huge delta there. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and I traveled to the island. She happens to speak French. And when we got there, I know for me, I love to do excursions. I like to just explore and do all kinds of fun things. But I found it very challenging because Americans, we don't take holiday like the Europeans. They take like 2 weeks and like they go on vacation, right? Where it's us, you may get like 2 weeks or 15 days a year, but typically you kind of stretch it out throughout the year. It's not spent in one swoop. So I came back from Martinique and I said, I have to do something about this. So I came home and on a Saturday morning, I sat on my front porch and I just started writing a business plan. It was like just pouring out of my soul. I just was going and I think I only got up to use the bathroom and to grab a few snacks. And then I said, I need to reach out to the tourism bureau to see if they can give me some guidance here. I literally just throwing a shot in the dark. Like, what's the worst they'll say no. So I threw a shot in the dark and I reached out to them and I said, hey, I have this plan and I have this concept I'd like to run by you and see if you guys would support it. They invited me to their office in New York City and I went down there and I had a whole suit and everything and I put on this presentation and they loved it. I introduced the idea of Martinique Excursions was the company. And that was actually the name of the website that I purchased. It's called Martinique Excursions. And it was a single platform where you can book your hotels, your tours, and your taxis. And I designed it, and I had to have two customers in mind because you got to have the operator who's a customer because they've got to be able to manage. And I had to design it with the actual American customer in mind. And the gaps I was able to fill were giving the customer the ability to use a single platform to handle everything, reducing the language barrier, reducing the currency barrier, and again, streamlining things, right? Because as soon as these people land, like they just need things laid out for them. They can't go through the friction of, well, let me pull up the translator app and try to figure things out at the airport and all this other good stuff. That's a great part of the experience of being able to try to figure things out. But for those who maybe don't have the time or don't want to do that, I wanted to make sure I catered to their needs. So I launched the business. It went really well for the first 2 years. And then unfortunately we had natural disasters strike. And when that happened, the airlines kind of pulled out and tourism from the American market kind of plummeted. And I don't think it's returned since that
Mhm.
the hurricanes and like, I think it was like 2019 happened. So then that's when I got back into telecom and focused on delivering great experiences for millions of customers. So it's a little bit more about me. But speaking of developing experiences from customers, you were kind of touching on that a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just talk a little bit more about, and really where I'm going with the whole conversation is I'm trying to also, just like I did with the attorneys and with the fitness gyms and other folks, is figure out like where does technology fit into these problems that you potentially bring up from a CX perspective. So
Mhm.
wanted to get a take from you on like what are some of the biggest CX challenges you see today in your world?
Sure. Well, I think the people who are engaged in leading CX efforts, their real day-to-day challenges are typically around the business, the corporation, and its expectations. And so, what I mean by that are balancing both the customer expectations and needs and wants with the business's expectations, needs, and wants. I think that's one thing that they're always struggling with. I don't talk to a single CX leader who is not talking about funding and being funded and having the money
Mm,
to operate successfully.
yeah.
That is a constant driving challenge. I think CX gone through a bit of a rough patch in the last couple of years because it's a very broad term. When I talk to people about CX or speak at an event or just talk to colleagues, some people look at CX as a voice of the customer process. Some think about CX as journey mapping. Some think about CX, so they think that CX is the individual parts of understanding a customer. And so that creates a lot of challenges in itself is that it's very ill-defined, generally speaking. I just joined the advisory board of the CXPA to help straighten that issue out, or at least provide some clarity around it. So I think that's one kind of global challenge that people face is a lack of clarity around what customer experience really is. I think that there's also been some challenges in CX recently because taking care of the customer isn't enough. It's a business, and we have to take care of the customer ultimately. Unless you're a rare business that has a built-in customer base that doesn't have any choice and you're a monopoly, maybe that you don't have to think so much about the customer. But most businesses are service related in some way, shape, or form and have to think about the customer. And so the the challenge of ROI for the money being spent on CX, a decent research project could be $400,000 to $500,000, and that's a big chunk of money to really go out and do some thorough research, which we've done at Sentinel now. And so I think that ROI and the idea of what really is CX, because you see all kinds of iterations and you now see things called customer success, and so you see all these iterations around customer that are continuously confusing. And I think that's from a kind of big picture, those are some of the biggest struggles around customer experience today. In terms of the
Can I
struggles.
add something to that, to what you're saying? So I can say it now because I don't no longer work there, but I worked for a charter communications, and I worked in CX. And I wanted to talk about that too because that's the thing. Like with these CX problems are global. It's not just industry related. Identity was a really challenging point for us when I was at Charter, because you own the customer experience, but you don't own the channels, right? Like, so I don't own the app, I don't own the IVR, I own the troubleshooting experience, I own the billing experience, right? But now, as a CX partner or leader, I then got to go to these people who own the channels, get on their roadmap, and advocate for something that I think is going to help the customer.
Mhm.
And that adds a whole nother problem because now you know, it becomes more of like, and I don't think this is talked about enough too in CX, is like, you also got to be really good at building relationships
Mhm.
because you don't tangibly own much. You are really the advocate for the customer. You're the person on the inside who's kind of got their ears to the ground, and you can say, this is what the customer needs. But now you got to convince several other stakeholders internally that they've got to go and invest into this need for the customer. So when you touch on budgeting as an issue, it is indeed an issue. It's something that I've spent so much time arguing about, right? Well, we don't have budget for it. Well, that doesn't leave me in a good place, and that doesn't leave the customer in a good place, because now I'm presenting this issue. I've got the data, and your reason for why we can't do it is because of budget. And because I don't own the actual channel, I can't just go and say, "Oh, I'll just do it myself." That is
Well,
where.
I think it customer experience, a lot of people have talked about fighting for a seat at the table. You don't need a seat at the table. You need a leadership seat at the table.
Mm,
And if an organization doesn't have whatever title you want to give them, essentially C-suite level customer experience person,
mhm.
that does many things. First, it demonstrates that they are committed to the customer experience and improving it and connecting it to the business improvement. But it also demonstrates to everyone else in the organization that this is an important part of our business, just like finance is, just like marketing is, just like human resources is. And in the organization that I work with today at Sentinel, I'm at the leadership table. I engage with every single part of our business and help them understand how their actions, what they do, impact the customer,
Mm,
make that connection for them. And that's part of gaining not only a strong relationship, but gaining their trust and helping them to understand what does that mean for them from an ROI perspective. If I'm in marketing, why do I care? Marketing and CX are sometimes the same thing. Why do I care about the customer's experience? I just want to get customers in the door. Or if I'm in human resources, why do I care about it? Or if I'm in finance, why do I care about it? And so being able to make those connections beyond the relationship are really a significant part of that leadership role.
Yeah, you are spot on. And if I can give you one scenario too, where this is where marketing and CX have to be aligned. I recently disconnected my service from Xfinity, and I documented this whole journey just so I could talk about it. And what happened from a CX standpoint is they billed me for not returning my equipment. But I actually owned my equipment, so I shouldn't have had to return it. So there is an error in the billing. But because CX and marketing are not talking to each other, along with that, the next day I got a retention card in the mail that says, "Hey, come back to us and get, $20 off your first month." Well, you just left me with a bad taste in my mouth. So that effort and money that you spent to try to get me back is going out the window, and it's going out the window mostly because of a poor customer experience, right? So it's super important that there is a marriage there, and the two have handshakes on several things, because I'm a classic example of, you did something wrong to me. Now, not only that, because you had this billing issue, I've got to pick up the phone and call you. So now I'm not even a revenue generating customer. And now I'm going to call your business, cost you money again, and then pull money out of your business because you owe me money. So it's really bad spiral. And it's a classic example of why, there needs to be internal partnerships with folks. So I just wanted to call that out because you mentioned marketing and CX.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think that from a CX issue standpoint, I think there are those global challenges that all practitioners need to think about.
Hmm.
And then from a customer perspective, it's customers are a moving target. In some businesses, they move very quickly, and in some businesses, they move very slowly. And so it's understanding how their journey evolves and being able to react to those changes appropriately within the business. I never say I own the customer experience or I own the customer journey, because I it is not my job to talk to customers,
That's a good
right?
take. That's a good
That's
take. I like that.
My job is to make the customer's life easier and to
Yes.
provide a return to the business. Uh,
That is a
and s
well-defined thought, sir. That is a
Right.
well-defined thought.
Right. And so I do, so those folks, most especially on the front line, who are often the most ignored, are the ones that are creating that customer experience. And so leveling our work at what I call the processes, how something gets done, with the service delivery of how it gets delivered through people, is what we really focus on.
I love how you kind of put that together. And like, I don't own it, and that's the thing. It's like we were kind of taught like, "Oh, you own the experience, you own this," but the way when you spun it, actually, you're right. Like, we don't. It's the folks who are really in that moment with the customer. They own the experience in that moment, because you're right. Like, these customers are moving targets, and I do think from a CX perspective, like, sometimes we're not agile enough for the customer. Things change very quickly sometimes. Like, things happen, and then our response time sometimes is not ideal. But I agree with you. Like, we are further back. We're taking the information from the front line to say, "Hey, how can we help that customer in the future?" So
Right.
absolutely agree.
So many organizations, when they're thinking about how they operate their business, their goal is to make their life easier.
Mm,
Their goal is not to make the customer's life easier. Well, we need this to enable to do that, or we need this because we'd like to know this, or we need this because marketing wants to know that. And so, or the reason why you call somewhere and you put in your customer ID number, and then you get transferred, and then you got to tell that person your customer ID number. And then they're like, "Oh, well, that's not really me. You got to talk to this person." And then you give them your customer ID number. That is designed around how the company wants to conduct business.
right. I
It's not
agree.
designed around how the customer wants to conduct business.
I agree. I have seen instances, I won't call out any companies particularly, but I have seen instances where you over guardrail customers for the sake of just your business and not for the sake of the customer. Sometimes companies will mask it as, well, this is, to protect the customer, but they're just feeling it's this friction point from the start to the end for them. So I don't feel like they're very well protected. I feel like you were just pissing them off, really.
Well, and to make customers jump through hoops
Yeah,
unnecessarily just doesn't make a lot of sense. It costs you in transaction time, it costs you in problem resolution, like it costs you in other ways that you may not be recognizing. And so to make customers jump through all of these hoops, and not to mention things like churn and everything else. So it costs you to make it difficult, because as soon as someone can make it not difficult or easier, or a better value, then customers are today more happy to switch providers for anything than they have ever.
absolutely. I have been advocating for this idea of, and it's edgy. So, but I say, I feel like the term policies kill a relationship. It's our policy to do this. Oh, it's not in our policy to do that, right? Is it real, really? Because sometimes if you push the right buttons, if you escalate high enough, suddenly the policy goes away. Like someone's able to say, hey, I'll make the decision and we'll do this. Well, then what was the whole point of the policy conversation to begin with? If what you're training my behavior to do is, if I raise my voice enough, if I become more of a peasant to you, you'll just give in and say, give them what they want or meet them in the middle.
Right. When
Why?
I when I call a business to, I don't like to call it to complain, but to bring forward my experience that was not positive,
Hmm,
I always ask the same question. So the first thing I do is that, they make you explain your issue or challenge. I explain my issue or challenge. And then to the person I'm speaking with, I say, I'd like to know now, do you have the authority to completely resolve my problem? Or do
mhm,
I need to speak with someone else?
mm,
And about 50% of the time, they say, no, I don't. And I speak to someone else.
yeah, right. But you were very savvy in that conversation to kind of, to avoid frustrating yourself and
Mhm.
going too deep into it. Hey, before I unload, can you make a decision or not? And if not, just send me right to the person who is, let's avoid all of this, right? And in my thought process, right, here's my thing. I say you get rid of policies. And it's a really it's edgy thought process. And the reason why I say you get rid of policies is because they're already consistently broken. Someone is making a decision based on the circumstance, based on that customer of like, hey, what am I going to do here? Someone has an authority to do that, right? And what I feel like we can do with technology is create some sort of logic that says, we've got to treat every customer. And this is where it goes to creating a personal relationship. We get rid of that elephant in the room that says, well, policy says you can't do this. And if you check out our website, it says it right there in the terms and conditions that nobody reads, by the way. I've never read it. I've read it once and I got confused. It's like, I have no idea what I'm signing myself up for sometimes. But by you saying our policy or go read our terms and conditions, it's kind of a slap in the face to the customer. It's kind of like, dude, you know, and I know that I'm not gonna go read that stuff. Like, don't insult someone like that. And I also feel like every customer's relationship with an organization is different. So you get rid of the policy and use technology or use AI to kind of say, okay, well, there's Bradley and there's James who have been, we're going to say, customers of the Visa company, right? We'll say we've been a credit card owner for Visa for and we have different personas. Riley spends maybe $300,000 a year on his card, and James maybe only spends $50 a month. James is chronically late. James has this issue, that issue. Bradley has been a star customer, but now both James and Bradley run into the same issue. James and Bradley both just had a late fee, right? And the policy is we don't credit back a late fee. Now, both James and Bradley are upset, but and now you have this policy today that says we don't credit. But like what you can do in the future is flip it and say, okay, well, they both got a late fee, they're both upset, but Bradley's bringing in $300,000 a year, right? Am I really going to have Bradley call us and get upset and fight and then potentially, or just say, I'm not even going to call you. He's just going to like go to American Express. I'll use my American Express, right? Why not? Hey, why don't we flip it, right? Why don't we be proactive? This is an opportunity for us to build our relationship. What if we, instead of charging Bradley that late fee, we use our analytics to say, you know what? We're going to give him back. He's not even going to call us. We're going to proactively give him back that $50. And then we're going to inform him. This is a moment where, yes, the issue is not on our side. He's late. He messed up on his side. But at the same time, this is a moment for us to build a rapport with Bradley. Let him know that we appreciate him and that there's no policy here between us. We're just going to, hey, Bradley, we noticed that you were late. Hey, man, here are some tools to help you avoid being late again. Here is a communication to inform you we gave you back that $50. Whereas you have James on the other side, I'm chronically late. I've had these issues. You don't have to credit me back that $50 because I haven't built enough value into the relationship with the business to have earned that. Does it mean that I won't call in and ask for it? No. But you don't even have to have me speak with an agent. You can have a system say, hey, look, you look for the anomaly on the account. The anomaly is there's the late fee. You can have the IVR. You can have whatever channel say, hey, I saw you were assessed as late fee. Like, here are some tools so it doesn't happen again. At this time, we're not able to credit you back. If I decide to churn and leave, then fine. You did your business a favor because I'm not bringing in a lot of revenue anyway. So why spend the money and the time investing in me when you're going to pay that agent plus whoever the manager is significant amount of money to go back and forth with me for 30 minutes just for them to say I'm not going to give you the money and I'm going to churn. It's like you're kind of also doing your business a favor. Not every customer is a good customer for the business. And I know that's it's a real kind of edgy thing to say, but I think it's true, right? But it also gives you, by getting rid of some customers, it gives you the ability to build a better relationship with ones that are investing in you and then making them want to stay. So you don't have to worry about them churning. I'm not going to leave a relationship where I'm completely happy in, but you're also incentivizing the customer to continue to pour into the relationship. Wow, like they really value me here. Well, I'm gonna go tell a couple friends to like, hey guys, like this was a great thing that they did for me. Who knows what they'll do for you? And who knows what else you can use with technology to help build a relationship. So I'm not saying to replace people. I'm not saying to replace the human. I'm saying, hey, use technology to replace the things that get in the way of us building a relationship, whether it be the customer in the business or the agent in the business. Let's get rid of those things. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's a little edgy.
I think what gets in the way most often relative to customer experience is a lack of training and a lack of empowerment.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
so I don't think policies get in the way as much as those two things.
Uh-huh.
I think that policy has a place. Sometimes it's necessary for legal reasons. If I'm in the housing business and I'm renting houses, I have lots of federal and state regulations to follow. If I'm going to make you sign a lease because it protects you and it does protect me, it is in fact a dual
Mhm.
positive. And so the terms of those agreements or laws have
Mm.
to apply. So I'm not necessarily against policy. What I'm against is what I call over policy or stupid policies.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
in that, when we examine something, a policy, a process, a way we conduct business, one of the things that I work with organizations on is you must always ask yourself the question, one singular question first, which is how does whatever we're deciding going to impact our customers? And someone will always come forward with the idea of the one customer who's going to try to cheat the system. And so let's examine that versus its impact on everybody else.
Mm.
And so, if probably that one exception who might get something over on you or cheat the system or whatever you want to call it is such a minute fraction of your income stream and profitability that it's not worth creating policy and process and getting your team members to follow. The number one thing that companies spend time training their employees on the front lines on are the rules, not the customer.
Ooh.
And so it's flipping that switch to say, if you go through onboarding with most organizations, you go through your training, it's all about the rules
Yeah,
or about how a certain piece of equipment functions and operates, the cash register that you have to use.
yeah,
It's not about making good decisions and empowering you to take care of the customer and how much the customer matters to our business, typically speaking.
yeah.
So flipping that to not focus on policy, to not over policy your business. The policy on taking good care of customers is far less complicated than the policy on what you should or shouldn't do with customers, or the endless policies on what you should or shouldn't do with customers.
Yeah.
So if you act in the best interest of the customer and the business, that's your customer policy.
That that
If you balance that out, that is in fact your customer policy. And it does, like your example, it does seem oversimplified. But at the end of the day, we've so complicated matters around taking care of customers
right.
and creating policy. And as you said, then creating mechanisms to override the policy, and then creating mechanisms to update the policy, right? And so we create so much work for ourselves
Yeah.
rather than giving guiding principles to our team members. And as I said, policies are necessary when you have legal requirements, when you have contractual obligations. They're necessary if that's part of your business. But generally speaking, in a restaurant, for example, there's not a lot of policy that's required to make decent food and deliver it in a style that meets your customer expectation.
Right.
There's
Right.
not a lot of regulation. There's a lot of etiquette, but there's not a lot of regulation about how the food is put on the plate or how
Yeah.
it's given to the customer, or there's just not. So we complicate that business by making policies and rules that the staff has to follow,
You're right.
um, that may not make much sense.
Right. Yeah, when you mentioned, I feel like that was such a lightning in the bottle moment when you said we spend more time training on policies rather than training on the customer. How can I be a customer? How can I be on the front line? I'm not a crossing guard. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a judge, right? Like I need to definitely have a lay of the land, but I definitely need to spend more time on that customer. I have sat in the call centers just to, I think anyone who works in CX, I always encourage people to go and sit with the frontline folks so you can hear
Hmm.
firsthand. But when you sit with the call center agents, and I think that's just probably almost any industry, in the back of their mind, they're not listening for like to hear the customer out on a human level. They're listening to see where does this all fit in the policy, right?
Mm.
And my response to you is going to be based on what the policy is. And I've seen it firsthand where they'll put up this wall, right? I don't, doesn't matter if grandma passed away in a horrific whatever the case is. Look, this is the policy and I'm going to stand behind it. And what that does, and I've even heard scenarios where they train agents never to apologize. You never apologize. And this goes back to your point before where it's about the business. You don't apologize because we don't want to admit guilt on anything. I understand it from a business perspective, but at the same time it kind of dehumanizes the whole thing and it kind of makes it like, well, I'm moving very robotic here. And I feel like there definitely needs to be more training on how to just build that rapport because someone has told me you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, right? You can have a really bad situation in front of you. I can have a customer who's extremely irate, ready to churn, but I've also seen some of the real seasoned vets who have a sweet heart take that moment and just get rid of the policy stuff, but just talk person to person and really solve that person's issue. Or maybe they couldn't solve the issue, but the person walked away feeling like, you know what? I was upset. I felt like I was heard. They couldn't fix it. They talked to me and explained it to me why, and I'm on my day. I'm on my way now. Yeah, I didn't get the result I wanted, but you didn't make me feel like I was talking to a robot or someone who was hiding behind the policy. I got someone who was ready to stand face to face with me and talk about this. I didn't get what I wanted, but that interaction made me feel better. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you there.
I work with a lot of organizations and have worked with a lot of organizations on the idea of service delivery models, how they deliver service, as well as service recovery models. What do they do when something goes wrong with a customer? Service recovery models. And the fascinating part is I don't present my opinion. I don't present anything besides facts. And those facts are based on a variety of things, consumer research typically, as well as psychological principles and psychological research. So to help team members, especially those on the front lines, to be empowered. Most team members don't feel empowered because Number one, it's the organization. They feel that they are not empowered and can't make decisions. But then the second reason is because they don't know what to do or how to do it, know how to resolve issues or challenges in an empowered manner. And so that's why they don't. They don't know what to do. Wegmans, which is a famous grocery store chain for and fairly well known for uh, being high end and customer oriented, trains all of their cashiers to ask you if you have found everything that you were looking for. Say no and see what happens. About
Okay.
half of them, their head explodes because they don't know what to do after that. After they ask the question they were forced to ask you, they don't know what to do next. If you go, "No, I didn't."
You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say yes.
You're supposed to do it people when they ask you and you're in a restaurant and they say, "How was everything?" and you go, "Fine." Tells you nothing, tells them nothing. Did you find everything? Tells them nothing, tells you nothing. And so, but when I focus on service delivery modeling and when I focus on service recovery modeling, I look at data and research not only from a consumer, what consumers say, and consumers don't always say what is reality, and consumers have a very difficult time in recall, typically speaking, and they have an even worse time in predictive, telling you what they would do in the future. And that's where psychological research comes in as a great balance. So you mentioned things like saying, "I'm sorry" when something goes wrong. The number one thing that a customer wants to hear when things go wrong is that you're sorry. And they don't want to hear that AT&T is sorry. They want to hear that the person they're talking to is sorry and apologizes. You don't have to apologize that we messed up. You can apologize that they had that negative experience. And the second thing they want is empathy.
Yes, yes.
And so it's an easy way. This is my free lesson of the day. It's an easy way from an empathetic perspective is to simply tell someone that you understand. Well, I understand why you're upset about that. I'd be upset too. So let's work together to figure out a solution. But most team members, especially those on the front lines, have never been given those tools or empowered to do those things.
Mm.
Consequently, that's what makes problems escalate and what creates churn and dissatisfaction.
Yeah. It's very different. It's a whole different conversation if you give me a problem and I'm saying, sorry, sir, I can't, our policy is that so we can't do something about this versus, "Oh, wow, I am sorry that this happened to you. I'm relating to you. I can understand that would frustrate me too. Let let's explore, see what can be done, right? Because when you say what can be done, maybe it's very small, but you're opening up something instead of closing something. You're opening us up to a dialogue and to exploring. And now I feel like you're at least trying your best, right?
Mhm.
Even if your best, and I say this to people all the time, like sometimes just trying your best, even if don't worry about the end result. If you show that you gave an effort, it takes things much further. So
Yeah, and
it,
talking about service recovery, a couple of my brave clients over the years have the best service recovery model to reach the highest level of satisfaction is to ask the customer what it is they'd like done and then do whatever it is they tell you. And that's brave for a variety of reasons. Businesses are frightened about that idea. But in the organizations where they've actually taken that on as the way in which they solve problems, they found that the customer and I forget the percentage, it's over 50%, says, "Nothing, I just wanted you to know." Especially with that frontline team member. "Well, there's nothing to do. I just wanted you to know." Or it is the most basic and simple solution that is brought forward.
to your point about the psychological element, have you heard of the supermarket called Aldi's?
Uh-huh.
So Aldi's has this promise, right? That like they want to make sure that you are satisfied. And it's so interesting. So if you purchase an item there and you're not happy with it, it can be, I think there are some exclusions, but for the most part, you can purchase an item and say, hey, I'm not happy. So I had a situation where my wife purchased, I think, some chicken. And then we opened up the package, it had kind of a pretty foul smell. So she goes, can you take it back? Of course, I get sent back to the store to take it back. So I go there and I'm going up to the agent and I say, "Hey, I just want to come and exchange this chicken and get a new one." And they say, "Okay, no problem." Like, supermarket, you would think, okay, it's no problem to exchange things, right? It's what they did after that kind of really hooked my entire family on shopping exclusively at Aldi's, which is, "Hey, I'm going to exchange this chicken for you, but because you're not happy, I'm actually going to refund you. And what that did, now you would think you can open up the whole scenario for abuse to happen, right? Like I can just buy a whole bunch of groceries, bring them all back, and then get all my money. But what they did is the opposite. They got more money out of me because now there's a peace of mind you built into the back of my brain that says, if I shop here and I have an issue, I'm not going to have friction if there's an issue. So and when you think it was genius because, but yes, I'm sure someone was shaking in their boots like, dude, someone's gonna like game the system here. But that person who games the system is probably one in a million. I mean, I'm sure I well overcompensated in my money from that one individual that's probably trying to game the system. But it's going back to your point, and I'll summarize it too, which is empowering the folks on the front line, empowering the folks who are closest to the customers to make decisions. It sounds like that's really where you think, and please correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. It's like, yeah, we do need these policies, but if we're going to have these policies, empowering the people who are closest to the customers to make decisions, give them the ability to make good business decisions on behalf of the business for that customer is the way to go. Is
Right.
that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And your example of getting a refund for your purchase, what that does psychologically, and in your explanation proves it, what that does psychologically is experiences are essentially a memory.
Yes.
And so what happens is that extra effort, whatever you want to call it, above and beyond,
Mhm.
I hate the word delighting customers, but that extra additional effort resets your memory from
Yes.
bad to good.
Yes.
Because even if you got your exchange chicken, you still went through all of the rigmarole to make it happen. But the recognition on the part of the business that you were not only got a bad product, but you were inconvenienced. And the biggest complaint from people when they have a problem with the business is the loss of time.
Yes.
I have to repeat myself. I've got to call you. I've got to do this. I've got to bring the chicken back. I've got to whatever it may happen to be. And so the biggest actual issue is the loss of time, which you can never compensate someone for.
Right. It's gone.
And so resetting the memory by doing something above the expectation that, yes, I'm expecting that you will exchange this for me and I'll go about my business and I'm
Mhm.
not any happier or any sadder about it, but it will erode my perception of your business. But if you do something beyond what is being expected by me, now you've reset my memory to negative or to positive from negative. And that's part of that idea of thinking about how do you guide team members to be successful and give them those tools and say, well, here's the data and the research behind this. Here's why we want you, and not scripts, but here's why we want you to apologize. Here's why it's important to empathize with that person. Here's why it's important to solve the problem. And here's why it's important to do this little thing at the end.
Yeah.
And so now they feel empowered. Now they feel as if they know how to solve the problem. And that's what makes them take action.
Amen. Amen. So that was beautiful. So I'm gonna segue a little bit, but I think, it will be interesting to see how things progress. But you definitely dropped a lot of gems here in regards to, flattening the middle here, which is, we don't the old like, let me get a manager or go talk to the manager, like that, those days need to kind of go away, right? We need managers to just be really leading and directing, less of taking care of escalations. We need the frontline folks to be empowered to make smart business decisions on behalf of the customer. And if you do that, what you're also going to do is you're going to flip the training from less of follow all these policies to more of, look, this is how you build a good dialogue, right? And this is how you make good business decisions. Like, if you're almost putting these frontline employees to treat this as your business, right? If I were to come into your business and with this issue, forget what the policy says, but how would you respond as a business owner if you want to keep that customer coming back? So I think that is going to definitely shift things, and we'll see how that turns out in the future. But I'm 120% with you there. But wanted to kind of segue into something. I mean, again, I have a lot of things I'm saying might be a little edgy, but I know you and I spoke last week about this one, and you had some preliminary thoughts, but I'll bring it up here, which is, what are your honest thoughts about using AI in the CX world, right? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think technology is always evolving. If you're old enough to remember the fax machine and that was going to change business, and no one
Yeah,
would ever travel to have a meeting again
yeah,
because they're going to get faxes now. And the same with, Teams and Zoom calls. And no one's going to ever travel again because they're going to be on a Zoom call, or no one's going to ever come into the office anymore. So I think that we always get hyped about technology, whatever the newest technology is. And I think AI is no exception to that. Probably even on a grander scale than anything that's happened in the last 50 years. I think that AI, in many ways, can be set up for failure. I think when leaders of a business think that AI is going to solve their problems, whether it be team member problems or the lack of team member problems, or it's going to be able to deal with the customer so that they don't have to, or that it's going to represent their business in the same way that they think they're representing their business. I think that from a leadership perspective, I think they have overhyped the potential of AI in general. From a customer perspective, I am already seeing a slew of pushback from customers about AI fatigue. And the idea that I have a chat bot, it never understands what I'm saying, and I end up having to talk to a person anyways. And instead of recognizing that the chat bot's abilities are extremely limited to do just this, you don't go on a website and it says, here's our chat bot, ask it whatever you want, and then you ask it and then it has no idea. As opposed to our chat bot can tell you anything about the terms in your lease. Ask it any question you want, which is at least a targeted function for AI. And it can be helped to understand because AI on its own does nothing. It needs human intervention to teach it, to enable it, to feed it information. And I think that it can be a dangerous thing if people are using it as a crutch. It's not going to solve their labor problems. It is the way it's being deployed today is not making anybody's life any easier, most especially the customer. And it lacks all of those things that we were just talking about. It lacks the ability to be empathetic. It lacks the ability to apologize unless it's in some canned scripting. It lacks the ability to think, what would this customer really like me to do to take care of them? And it puts into play a lack of relationship in my perspective. And I think that AI, however, can do many things that rest of service to the customer. But if you're
yeah.
relying on that touch point or that interaction to create a relationship, it's not going to happen with AI.
Agreed. One if I where I was playing around too, where what can AI do in CX, right? And I kind of made this post. I said, here's the thing: when you think about customer communications, right? There's emails that are sent to customers, and before those emails are sent out, there's a group of people that sit around a table and they try to figure out exactly what's the tone, how we want to phrase it, and the problem is. You go out with one email template to millions of customers, millions of personalities, millions of interpretations, and you're trying to make this one thing fit, and it struggles, right? So you do struggle with that. And I propose the idea of, why don't you build personas in AI and have those personas help you send out communications, because maybe Bradley likes a more detailed statement or detailed email, where James likes it concise, right? Just give him the facts. Like, you don't, but what you've done is you've personalized it. And this is where I feel like AI can help in some areas of CX, which is when it comes to personalizing moments where it doesn't necessarily involve an agent. But like, if I've got to send you a communication, right? That canned response, that canned template that you use, it gets tiring and people don't use it. But it also feels like, hey, like it's not for me. It's like, that's not how I read things, right? And I feel like having AI help you personalize communications also removes people sitting at a table and arguing and saying, well, it's got to be written this way. Well, our customers like this and our customers like that. Well, listen, give everybody what they want. Everybody gets the communication the way they like it. And that's where I feel like, if there was a home for AI and CX, that would probably be one of the homes. But I agree with you. There are some definite limitations, though.
Yeah, and I am not professing to be an AI expert in any stretch of the imagination. However, what I find is that most things being touted as AI is just software. It's
Hmm.
just software that it has an if then statement.
Yes.
And that's what most AI is today.
Yes.
And the problem is customers don't think in terms of if then statements. Customers think in terms of problem solving uh, or goals. So a customer calls you with either a goal they want to achieve or a problem they want to solve.
Hmm.
AI often is not programmed, and nor is it really intelligent. And so it doesn't know what your goal is and it doesn't know what your problem is.
Hmm.
And the human intervention. Now we use programs for a lot of things. Our leasing, for example, is all online and it's all automated. And that's an efficient use of AI, right? Because do you need me to walk you through filling out your lease? Probably not. You're not going to read it anyways
Yeah.
because it's 40 pages long and full of legal things that this state requires, and then the federal government requires, and then this one
Right.
requires. And so you're not going to read it. So, what we can do is to give you a simplified 1 page summary of what your
Yeah.
lease is.
Yes.
And that can make your life easier. And to say, hey, we understand this, even in a automated environment, hey, we understand leases can be long and complicated. Would you like a 1 page summary of the terms in your lease? So
Yeah.
now people are like, well, yeah, I don't have to read the whole thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're doing me a service.
You're right.
And that can be automated. So
Yeah.
I think it's not without merit. I think it's and you see it from all the AI companies going out of business already. Those that are touting their software or this thing or that solution, that are already going out of business. And so I think that there's definitely good uses. I
Yes.
think definitely productive uses. I think what we have to understand is like the fax machine, it's not going to solve all of our problems. Like the computer, it's not going to solve all of when every desk had, and I'm old enough to remember, like I remember when no desk had a computer on it. And now every desk has a computer on it. And so that didn't solve our problems either.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
Matter of fact, customer satisfaction continues to decline in most industries.
Hmm. Hmm. I know we're coming up close towards the end, so I just wanted to round out with one last question, which is, taking what we've discussed today, which is, first of all, before we conclude here, I want to say thank you again for coming on. Like you came here and you dropped a lot of roses and a lot of gems, so thank you for that. And you've given some things for people like me and other folks in technology who will see this to really kind of think about. But as a product owner, right? And thinking about things we talked about and your experience and what you know today, like I'm always looking to build something to help somebody. If you had to leave me with a problem statement, whether it be, hey, build this for our frontline folks or build this for our clients or build this for me, like what would that problem statement be? If you had an opportunity to build, you could tell me whatever you want built,
Sure.
that would
Well, I
help.
think I think it's kind of a combination of things that exist today. It's being able for someone on the front lines, whatever that looks like, if it's in a call center or in a face-to-face encounter with a customer, um, to be informed about that customer.
Hmm.
So CRMs attempt to do this to some extent, but to really inform about that customer, what has their challenges been? What has been their attitude? Where has there been issues with them so far? What were the resolutions that were presented? What is this person most likely coming to you about?
You know what? You're right. Imagine if agents had a visual. Like as soon as someone, I'm just using this one because someone comes in the call queue and I could see what the relationship has been and like where the interactions like if I see a chart, negative, negative, negative interaction, okay, well, let me take that into consideration before we go down this path. But I can at least lead the conversation with empathy because I know that every single time you've called here, it's been bad. So that changes things, right? That simple little feature definitely
Yeah.
changes things.
One of the projects that we're working on is to give some of that information that makes sense and that's feasible to the people who are in like our maintenance service center where people could call and they can also go online, obviously, to discuss a maintenance issue they might be having in their home. And so understanding what historically has happened to them is very important because to them, they know their toilet broke 6 times in the last 30 days.
Yeah.
If you're just blindly answering the phone until then you go and look up their record and maybe you don't read the whole thing, but if you can know that that person has had ongoing challenges, it allows you to set the tone for the conversation in a way that creates a deeper relationship with that individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Dear Mr. Smith, I see this is the third time you had this issue. I'm terribly sorry about that. Versus, well, tell me what's going on. Well, okay. Then you're asking that customer to go back into a painful place in their mind to regurgitate all the things that have happened.
That's right. But if you could say, "Oh, Mr. Jones, I've noticed that you've had a couple of toilet issues in the last 30 days. Are they resolved?"
Yeah. Oh, thank
No.
goodness.
As a matter of fact, that's why I'm calling. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
really sorry to hear that. So let's work together to get this fixed.
Yeah. You just saved that customer a good 3 to 5 minutes of explanation
That's
and
right.
frustration.
Right. Right. You've
Awesome.
given them time rather than robbed them of time.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, Bradley, thank you so much again, sir, for coming on the podcast. Give me 1 second. Let me just okay.